My husband, Lloyd, was an artist. And when we first met, he told me that what I did, my art, was that of a technician, and that I was a very good technician. What he was implying was that I was good at paint by numbers. I have given much reflection to Lloyd's observations over the years. In fact, I've gone out of my way to find ways to express a form of art that would allow me to find my creative side, if I had one. The various art projects around my house, garage, and yard are testaments to my efforts. On one of Lloyd's hunts for the perfect shot, photography that is, I came along, and I noticed what I considered to be a wonderful shot, holding up my hands. I figured that I had it. And then Lloyd, he came up behind me, and he was very excited. He said, "That's great," he said. And for the first time, he told me that I had a great eye. I felt elated. After years of being told by my parents, friends, and teachers that I just wasn't artistic, here was someone who for the first time in my life told me that there might be some hope. For years, Lloyd had an Albert Einstein famous quote taped to his computer. It said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And I believe that part of the reason that Lloyd loved that quote was because he didn't have an advanced degree. And let's face it, especially around here sometimes, without an advanced degree, many folks can question your knowledge of the world. Yet here was a genius saying that imagination was more important. But strictly, the interpretation of Einstein's quote, that is misleading. Having knowledge isn't particularly important, but being able to imagine and embrace novel possibilities is the true mark of genius. That's not what he really meant. In 1929, while being interviewed by the Sunday Evening Post, this following exchange occurred. Einstein: "I believe in intuition and inspiration, and sometimes I feel that I'm right. I do not know that I am. When two expeditions of scientists financed by the Royal Academy went forth to test my theory of relativity, I was convinced that their conclusions would tally with my own hypothesis. And I wasn't surprised of the eclipse of May 29, 1990, confirmed my intuition. I would have been surprised if I was wrong," he said. The reporter said, "Then you trust more your imagination than your knowledge?" And Einstein said, "I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limiting. Imagination encircles the world," he said. And Lloyd would not have disagreed with any of that. But he would have interjected and say that learning, continuous learning, is very important as well. So after that shot of Lloyd saying I had a great eye, I was really, really excited about that. Because I thought that here was a chance for me to get out of this box of cold facts and knowledge and going to something more than what we are, to adventure beyond into the realm of what else must be out there. What else can I do than just numbers and facts and boxes and getting things into my corporate world? There must be more. So Lloyd really helped me with that, because ever since then I have been working on it, and I've been working on it. And for some of us, it's just not imagination or knowledge that we need. Sometimes we need that spark of encouragement. For me, that spark was Lloyd's words spoken to me over 40 years ago. He made me believe I could move from the right side of my brain to the left, where I could use both my imagination and my knowledge as I create. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, for getting us started on the practice of imagination. Who don't you see? That was the first question I was asked in seminary. The very first step in being beloved community is to identify who is in your blind spot. If someone or a group of people is invisible to us, then whatever authority we have, whether it's personal authority or positional authority, whether consciously or unconsciously, we create the other. The space between the other and seeing another in their full humanity and living in community together is the space of moral imagination. Why imagination? Well, it is the nerve, the risk of seeing another, of imagining something new and creating or acting towards that end. On the refrigerator in your fellowship hall is a magnet put there by Schottky that says there is no other. This is a statement of moral imagination. Another, A-N-O-T-H-E-R, comes from, the prefix of that comes from the Greek meaning lacking or without. So without the other, lacking the other, one more of the same kind. Contrast that with the word the other, used to mean different, separate. Moral imagination is the work of seeing another instead of the other. It's the scrawled letters on the walls in a Mad Max where the prisoners break free and it says, "We are not things." Because fundamental to being is being recognized in the fullness of inherent worth and dignity. The work of being seen and seeing one another. Well, this is the beginning of the definition of justice. And justice movements have helped flip our language so that personhood is coming first. Not everyone does this, not everyone prefers it, but for example, some would say it's better to use persons living below the poverty line instead of the poor, or persons who are incarcerated instead of the criminals. We affirm another person as the primary identity instead of a thing, the criminal, the poor, which creates the other. And it's not specific to human beings. Rights of nature is the movement that is giving rights of personhood to streams and rivers, mountains, wetlands. Instead of saying fresh water is a human right, we might acknowledge that all beings have a right to fresh water, and water itself, should be water, not sludge, and has the right to be so. Living together with this moral code of seeing one another as beings with inherent worth and dignity, well, that is the beloved community. Yesterday, I was sitting with some friends while Alan played a gig. It was a beautiful warm day in Cable, Wisconsin, and as I sat down, they began joking with me, the Unitarian Universalist minister. They're like, "Oh, hey, where's your flock of unicorns? Oh, come on, Stacy, it's not just love, it's warm, fluffy love. Let's all be friends." I mean, they were poking fun out of me, but I realized something in that moment. And I did tell them that anything they said was fodder for this sermon, so they were warned. But I realized that it is exceptional to hold the vision of the beloved community. It is something that is unique about Unitarian Universalist identity. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone chooses to do it. It is hard work. Moral imagination is hard work. Instead of feeling like they were making fun of me, I felt like they were pointing out a superpower. The conviction that, as 19th century abolitionist and Unitarian minister Theodore Parker said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Now, that phrase is often misattributed to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who often paraphrased that quote. For example, he said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." Beyond the ark requires the work of imagination and the gift of faith. We cannot know it from here. The sight of consciousness, the vision of imagination is needed to divine the curve of the arc that bends from the troubles that bind us in systems that perpetuate oppression, that perpetuate the other. Martin Luther King Jr.'s moral imagination was his ability to envision and advocate for a just and equitable society that he thought was possible, even in the face of profound injustice and racism that he and others experienced. He called this place where they were going the beloved community. In the canon of Black theology, which are the writings and teachings of African Americans to claim belovedness in a world that constantly told them otherwise, there is a teaching called double vision. You see both at once. You see the fullness of your belovedness through and through. You see it every day looking in the mirror. Affirm it with affirmations. You celebrate it at every church service, because at the same time you experience a world that doesn't care about you, that doesn't see you as fully human. Double vision is seeing both are true. It is a spiritual muscle. It needs to be exercised, it needs to be taught, and it needs to be celebrated, or it will atrophy. It requires conversation and dialogue with others, because for a long time, the world was flat, right? With our physical eyes, we can't see beyond a horizon line. It all falls away. This is what is tricky about an arc. In order to imagine it, we need one another. Knowing that we are all beloved is the foundation of this vision. And what nerve it takes to imagine this, what courage in leadership Dr. King showed in articulating this. Now, there's 3 reasons that I can come up with for why we don't see people, why we don't see this beloved community, why maybe we think it's all about us and only acknowledge our social location. One is ignorance. Not in a judgmental or negative way, but simply that we haven't had the opportunity to interact. We haven't learned another story. We haven't seen a norm other than our own social location. Barbara Kingsolver's best-selling book, Demon Copperhead, did this for victims of the opioid epidemic. Demon Copperhead, the nickname of the key character, is a child who is like the innocent of the innocent. He is failed at almost every step in his life by systems of family, by social systems. His town is targeted by the drug representatives where they can make a lot of money off of people's pain, and that story is told. He is given opioids for an injury in high school and becomes addicted. This book gives a story to a person who was victimized by companies intentionally getting people addicted to opioids. He wasn't the addict. It tells the story of a society that was willing to blame someone as the problem instead of seeing a beloved who was suffering. From my own particular social location, I was raised by a single mother. I lived with a friend who was being raised by a single dad. I see single parents. I cannot turn this off. I know my experiences are not exhaustive, but there are some things that are pretty universal. It is hard to make meetings as a single parent if you can't bring your kids. It's hard to make meetings if you can. It's hard, if not impossible, to go on vacation, to a conference, or even to someone's house for dinner unless kids can come. So if in-person attendance is required, say at a school board meeting where there is no option for childcare, it is silencing the voices of single parents. It perpetuates systems that do not work for these households. So again, not malicious, but just systems that keep going because these people are unseen. The second reason that people may be unseen is because it's threatening to see them, and so we look away. Now, this can be based on an unconscious bias, but I think more often it's to be protective of our own fragile, vulnerable hearts. We look away because it hurts. One example for me is I don't want to see childhood hunger. It makes me feel so helpless. I am upregulated with emotions. I get overwhelmed right away. I look away. I don't want it in my community. I just want it to go away. But that's not helpful. That doesn't make it go away. I have to step into the work in order for the work to be done. I love the quote by the late Pope Francis, "You pray for the hungry, then you feed them." This is how prayer works. It's another example of how the arc that bends towards injustice, what or who is acting upon that arc. I think this quote by Pope Francis reminds us, as well as the work of Dr. King and so many who are in these liberative frameworks, we bend the arc. We're part of imagining a world in which that arc bends. Now, a third reason why people are invisible is intentional erasure. From a transgender friend of mine, they said, being seen is what saves me, but being seen could get me killed. Findings from the report by the National Center for Transgender Equality just continue to show alarming rates of violence and harassment experienced in contexts by transgender people, including educational settings, at work, in interactions with police, with their family members, at homeless shelters, accessing public accommodations, in prison. Basically, there's no safe place. It can only be called an epidemic of violence, and it's ongoing and it's unslowing. Under the first Trump administration, there were 62 rule changes or guidances that were rolled back regarding transgender protections. We're continuing to see this work now. Claiming belovedness, especially in a world that is trying to erase you, this is double vision. I'm really excited that later this month you will have a guest speaker for a worship service, Ben, who will be talking more about inclusion. I think that's going to be an amazing service, because a moral code in a community is literally what determines who counts. Who is being counted in your community? I know that you all sang the Mammoose song last year, "We shall be known by the company we keep." What a profound statement. A classic way to work with moral imagination, this what's beyond the arc, what's possible, is through metaphor and story. And today's story for all ages, you heard about Roxaboxen, an imaginary city that children developed. It included a cemetery. It included a place for riding horses wild and fast. They brought beauty into their homes. They imagined what they wanted in their own city. Moral imagination reminds us that novelty is always possible, that systems we are in are created and perpetuated by what we believe is possible. The threshold for change in cultural systems is 25% of the population. We know that providing a service that fills the gap, such as having a food shelf, does not change food security issues in communities. It fills the gap. Systems that perpetuate hunger and food insecurity change through movement building, through grassroots organizing, through communities coming together. Nothing for us without us, with all voices at the table, sharing ideas about what's possible. And what's amazing about this is that a lot of people are waiting for cultural change, but with 25%, a lot of people are now saying, you can just start acting in the way you believe and it will catch on. You will be an example. And if you're talking about 25%, there's 25% of us out there who are thinking along the lines of the beloved community. What could happen if we just started living as if it were here? There's many more things that could be said about imagination. I think one of the things I want to say is the creative act, co-creating the world together, is one of the foundational principles of Unitarian Universalism as it relates to being a spiritual community together. This conviction that we can be part of co-creation, and that is possible each and every day in creation. It's the possibility of believing that we can be free, believing that we need one another, choosing to go together in community, accepting that we can't fix everything that's wrong, knowing that we might not have a fully developed plan to get there, that you can imagine what's possible and then work with the circumstances that arise. And that it might be hard, but to move out of systems of oppression is to move towards freedom. It sounds paradoxical. To be the beloved community is to be free. As you go about your week, take time to imagine the arc of the moral universe. Wonder about the beloved community. What is beyond the arc of what you can see right now? Take the first step. Check your blind spots. And know that faith in and work for the beloved community can bend the arc. May it be so. Amen.